Action versus inspired action. I've done a couple videos on inspired action, but I really want to drive the point home in this video because I've been getting a lot of emails and a lot of you guys are asking, hey man, what's the difference between regular action and inspired action? What is the benefit of inspired action? Where does it come from? How do I use it with the law of attraction? So this is what we're going to cover today. Let me first say this. Anytime we create something or we manifest something and bring it into our physical world, it's coming from a state of inspired action. So first we have to understand how we create. We are constantly creating or manifesting or attracting because we're constantly communicating out towards the universe via our thoughts and our feelings, right? Thoughts have dynamic or electromagnetic frequencies. Your feelings have the same thing. So look at yourself like a receiver. So you're constantly tuning in and receiving stuff, right? Look at it like that. So we're gonna create from two aspects. You're gonna manifest from the higher self or the lower self. The lower self is what we call our ego, is our conscious analytical thoughts and things like that. The higher self now is more an intuitive part. So the first part of this series question is, where does inspired action come from? It comes from the higher self. Now let's cut to the chase. Here's what inspired action is. Inspired action is a feeling or a nudge from your gut to do something in harmony. An example of inspired action is one day you're sitting around and something says, hey, why don't I call John or call Mark? And you were never thinking about John, Mark, Samantha, whatever, and you just decide to call them. That's an example of inspired action. Now let's talk about regular action or forced action. Forced action will usually come in the form when you feel some type of feeling such as guilt, anxiousness, fear, any type of those feelings are what we call forced action. Forced action is where you start to critically think about doing something and then you're wavering back and forth, or your mind is telling you to do something. You feel like you have to do something. You feel more like it's a guilt trip if I don't do it. If I don't do it, I'll feel like I'm lazy or I'm not doing anything. That is forced action. Inspired action is coming from the authentic part of you. When we use inspired action, we're actually in a flow to create with the universe. So did you know you can actually practice to develop inspired action? You can actually get more inspired action into your reality. I'll show you a few steps, how to do that. Because the thing is, you and I, we are constantly being fed inspired action to the universe. But what tends to happen, guys, is it tends to get gobbled up by our ego, which is forced action. So let's show you some signs and some things that you can use to build your inspired action so that you can take this to the next level. A simple tool that you can do to build inspired action is to practice being more aware around all of your surroundings. Another tip to build inspired action, practice meditating. Maybe sitting in silence, relaxing, let things come to you. You're going to build inspired action. Another way to build inspired action is to not judge things that come into your reality. Don't put big judgment on them. Just observe them, see what it is, and listen. Another way you're going to build inspired action is to practice to start listening to your authentic self. Mark, how do I listen to myself? It's a great question. So you listen to yourself by cutting out the ego, by disengaging from that mind chatter of guilt, fear, anxiety. Get into the state of just feeling what it's feel like to feel yourself, your inner self. That's how you're going to develop inspired action. Now, we create through inspired action. We miscreate through forced action. I repeat that. We create through inspired action, we miscreate through forced action. So let me do a quick review and I'll go over this again. Remember, inspired action will feel like something from the gut. It won't feel logical. It'll feel nudge-like. It will feel inspired. It'll feel like a flow state. It'll just come out of the blue. It's an inner talking. That is inspired action. Forced action is the opposite. Forced action will have some ulterior motive behind it. Usually forced action will be accompanied by a feeling of lack, doubt, worry, guilt. Some type of feeling will bring forced action. Remember now, where does forced action originate? Lower self. What is the lower self? Ego. Where does inspired action come from? Or where does it begin? It begins in your authentic self or your higher self. So you have to start to practice the familiarity with these things, because at first it's not going to make sense to you. You're not going to know if it's inspired or forced. But with this video, hopefully now you can get a clearer picture, understanding what is inspired versus forced. All right, so the question now begins. So now I know where inspired action comes from. It comes from my higher self. Now, why is inspired action more powerful than forced action? Why does inspired action work versus forced action? That's a great question. So the reason why inspired action works, because when you're using inspired action, you are using a part of you that has the ability to see your whole life. When you're using forced action, you're using a part of you that has the ability to see limited aspects of your life. See, the thing with the lower self or the ego is it doesn't see everything together. It sees everything separate. Your ego sees physical reality as just that, physical. The higher self doesn't see a physical reality. The higher self sees one reality, spiritual and physical entangled. Therefore, when the higher self, it not only can see your physical, but it sees spiritual things that you and I can't see, which spiritual just means beyond the physical. So whenever we are using inspired action, whenever it comes to us, guys, you will always be guaranteed success. Inspired action will always lead you to your manifesting goals. Forced action is a hit or miss. Sometimes you can get to your goal, but you don't get the fulfillment of your goal. So when you're going to use inspired action, always remember, it always will lead you to success. Because remember, it's coming from a part of you that sees every single thing, the pitfalls, and it's going to communicate to you to guide you to make the right decisions. Here's something else that people need to understand. Most of our actions we take are trying to fix the actions we messed up on. In other words, most of the action steps we take, we're trying to fix the recreating of forced action. So we have been conditioned and taught that we have to jump and take action. That messes up your direct connection with your authentic self. Doesn't work like that. Don't do that. Don't jump at anything. Now, forced action or regular action is right. Some is right sometimes. Sometimes you have to take forced action, but you will know the difference though. You will know when to take forced action, when not to take forced action. But when it comes to your big goals or the dreams or anything you create, it always comes to you in inspired action. Because remember, the authentic self knows the infinite channels to bring you what you want. Lower self doesn't know that. So when you can master this, that's when you'll take your game to the next level. Now, the reason why inspired action is so powerful is because whenever you have inspired action, you have no resistance. Think about it. When you feel that gut urge to do something, there's no resistance. Think of the word inspire. When you have inspiration, you're in a feeling state of feeling good. You're flowing. So here's another tip for you to know when you're in inspired action mode. When you just feel regular. You just feel good. You don't have any of those feelings of guilt, worry, doubt, fear, stress, anxiety. None of that will come up whenever inspired action is in play. So an easy formula for you to remember. I'll make it very simple for you guys. Whenever it's inspired action, notice, check first how you feel. If you feel normal, not just in the flow, it's inspired action. If you have feelings such as guilt, worry, doubt, uncertainty, anxiousness, it's forced action. See how that works? That's what I want to leave you with. So now you should have an understanding inspired versus regular action. See you guys. Thanks.